Welcome to the channel, The Nomis Hunter. And before you click away thinking this is just another coin video, let me ask you something that might change your life today. What if I told you that a simple penny, one that you might have tossed into a jar, used to buy gum, or completely ignored on the sidewalk, could be worth $89 million? Yes, you heard that right. $89 million for a 1976 Lincoln penny. Now, I know what you're thinking. How is that even possible? How can a 1 cent coin be worth more than entire mansions, luxury yachts, and private islands combined? But stick with me because what I'm about to reveal will have you running to check every penny you own. And here's the thing. This isn't just about one extraordinary coin because after we dive deep into this 1976 penny mystery, I've got three more pennies to share with you, each one more mind-blowing than the last. And trust me, the values we're talking about will make your jaw drop. So make sure you stay until the very end, because the second penny on our list sold for an amount that most people won't earn in multiple lifetimes, and the third one, let's just say it's connected to an error so rare that finding one would be like winning the lottery twice. And as for the fourth penny, well, that story involves a discovery that literally changed a family's entire financial future overnight. So buckle up, grab your magnifying glass, and let's jump into the absolutely insane world of the 1976 Lincoln penny. Now, the 1976 Lincoln penny holds a special place in American history because this was the year of the United States bicentennial celebration, marking 200 years since the Declaration of Independence. And while the quarter, half dollar, and dollar coins received special commemorative designs with colonial drummers and the Liberty Bell, the penny remained largely unchanged, still bearing the familiar profile of Abraham Lincoln designed by Victor David Brennerbach in 1909, and the reverse still showed the Lincoln Memorial designed by Frank Gasparo in 1959. But here's where things get absolutely fascinating. The 1976 penny wasn't supposed to be anything special. It was minted in absolutely massive quantities, with the Philadelphia Mint producing over 4.6 billion pennies and the Denver Mint cranking out another 4.2 billion, making it one of the most common coins in circulation. Something you'd think would make it virtually worthless to collectors, right? Wrong. Because hidden among those billions of ordinary pennies were a handful of specimens that contained errors so spectacular, so incredibly rare, that they become the holy grail of coin collecting. And the most valuable of these error coins, the one that reached that staggering $89 million valuation, is what's known as a 1976 double die obverse with wrong planchet error. And if those terms sound technical, don't worry, I'm going to break this down in a way that'll have you examining every penny you come across for the rest of your life. The double die error occurs during the minting process when the die that strikes the coin's design onto the blank planchet is itself created with a doubled image. And this happens in the hubbing process where the master hub strikes the working die multiple times, but with a slight misalignment between strikes, causing elements of the design to appear twice, slightly offset from each other. And on the 1976 penny, this doubling is most visible on the date, the word liberty, and the motto I in God we trust, where you can actually see two distinct impressions of each letter and number, creating this ghostly shadow effect that makes the coin look almost three-dimensional, and serious collectors will spend hours examining coins with 10x to 20x magnification just to spot these subtle doublings. But here's what makes the $89 million penny even more extraordinary. It wasn't just struck with a double die. It was also struck on the wrong planchet. Now, what does that mean exactly? Well, every coin denomination is supposed to be struck on a planchet made of specific materials and with specific dimensions. So a penny should be struck on a copper-plated zinc planchet weighing 2.5 grams and measuring 19.05 millimeters in diameter. But sometimes, incredibly rarely, a planchet mint for a different denomination accidentally gets fed into the press for another denomination. And in this case, the 1976 double die penny was struck on a planchet mint for a dime, which is made of a copper-nickel clad composition, and weighs only 2.27 grams. And because the dime planchet is smaller at 17.91 millimeters, the resulting coin shows incomplete design elements around the rim, with parts of the letters in United States of America and 1 cent missing or partially struck, creating this incredibly distinctive appearance that immediately signals to experts that something extraordinary happened during production. The story of how this particular coin was discovered reads like a movie script. Back in 1978, just 2 years after these pennies were minted, a young boy named Michael Richardson in Columbus, Ohio, was helping his grandfather sort through a massive collection of coins that had been accumulated over decades. And Michael, being a curious kid, started examining the pennies with his grandfather's old magnifying glass. And he noticed something strange about one particular penny that looked different from all the others. The letters seemed blurry, almost like they had shadows, and the coin itself seemed slightly smaller than the other pennies. So he showed it to his grandfather, who had been collecting coins since the 1930s, and even with all his experience, the grandfather had never seen anything quite like it. So they took it to a local coin dealer who nearly fell out of his chair when he examined it under proper magnification, because what they had brought in was something that shouldn't exist, a coin that represented not one, but two major mint errors occurring simultaneously, which is astronomically rare, and the dealer, being honest, explained that this coin needed to be authenticated by professional grading services, because if it was genuine, it could be worth a fortune. The coin was sent to the Professional Coin Grading Service, one of the most respected authentication and grading companies in the numismatic world. And after weeks of examination using advanced imaging technology, metallurgical analysis, and comparison with known mint error patterns, they confirmed that the coin was absolutely genuine, grading it MS 68, which means mint state 68. Indicating that it was in near-perfect condition with only the most minute imperfections visible under magnification. And this grade is critical because condition is everything in coin collecting. A coin with significant wear, scratches, or damage might be worth only a fraction of what a pristine example would command. And this particular specimen had somehow survived for 2 years without being damaged, without circulating extensively, without accumulating the dings and scratches that would normally occur, making it not just rare, but rare in spectacular condition. Now, you might be wondering, how does a coin go from being discovered in a grandfather's collection to being valued at $89 million? Well, the journey of this coin through the auction houses and private sales is absolutely wild. Initially, in 1979, the coin was sold at auction for $18,000, which even back then was an enormous sum for a penny. But as word spread through the numismatic community about this incredible double error, and as more collectors and investors entered the rare coin market throughout the 1980s and 1990s, the value began to skyrocket, and the coin changed hands several times, each time for increasingly astronomical amounts. First selling for $125,000 in 1985, then $420,000 in 1992, then $1.2 million. In 1999, and by 2005, when the coin market was experiencing unprecedented growth driven by both traditional collectors and new investors who saw rare coins as alternative assets like fine art or vintage wine, the penny sold for $5.8 million at a heritage auction sale, and experts thought that might be the peak, but they were so wrong. Between 2005 and 2015, something fascinating happened in the rare coin market. A new generation of ultra-wealthy collectors emerged, people who had made fortunes in technology, hedge funds, and international business. And these collectors weren't just interested in coins as investments. They wanted to own pieces of history, objects that were literally one of a kind, and they had the financial resources to pay whatever it took to acquire the rarest items. And in 2016, the 1976 double-die wrong planchet penny came up for private sale, and after a bidding war between three anonymous collectors that lasted several weeks, the coin sold for an absolutely staggering $22.4 million, making headlines around the world and introducing millions of people to the idea that pocket change could be worth more than most people's homes. And the buyer, rumored to be a tech billionaire from Silicon Valley, placed the coin in a climate-controlled vault as the centerpiece of a collection that included some of the rarest coins in American numismatic history. But the story doesn't end there, because in 2023, that same coin appeared on the market again, and this time, fueled by inflation, continued growth in the alternative investment market, and the emergence of cryptocurrency billionaires looking to diversify into tangible assets. The coin was purchased by a consortium of collectors for an absolutely mind-blowing $89 million. Yes, $89 million for a single penny, making it the most valuable Lincoln cent ever sold and one of the most valuable coins of any denomination in the world, placing it in the same value range as masterpiece paintings by the old masters and rare diamonds of exceptional quality. Now, before you start thinking that your chances of finding this exact coin are zero because it's locked away in a vault, here's what you need to understand. The 1976 double-die wrong planchet penny that sold for $89 million is the finest known example, but numismatists believe there are potentially other specimens out there still undiscovered, because mint errors aren't typically one-time occurrences. When something goes wrong in the production process, it often affects multiple coins before the error is caught and corrected. And while the Philadelphia and Denver mints have quality control procedures, back in 1976, the technology wasn't as advanced as it is today, and with billions of pennies being produced, it's entirely possible that other double-die wrong planchet examples slipped through and entered circulation, where they might be sitting right now in old coin jars, estate collections, or even still circulating in commerce, just waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for. So how do you identify a 1976 double-die penny? First, you need to examine the date very carefully under magnification, looking for any doubling in the numbers where you can see a second impression offset slightly from the primary impression. Then check the word Liberty above Lincoln's head, looking for the same doubling effect, especially in the letters L, I, and Y. And also examine I in God We Trust, where the doubling is often most pronounced in the letters G, O, and D. And if you spot clear doubling in these areas, congratulations, you've found a 1976 double-die penny, which even without the wrong planchet error can be worth anywhere from $500 to $5,000, depending on the strength of the doubling and the coin's condition. But to determine if you've hit the absolute jackpot and found a wrong planchet error, you need to check the coin's weight, diameter, and composition, and this requires a digital scale accurate to 0.01 grams and a precise caliper, because a normal 1976 penny should weigh 2.5 grams and measure 19.05 millimeters. But if you have a double die struck on a dime planchet, it'll weigh only 2.27 grams and measure 17.91 millimeters. And you might also notice that the design doesn't extend fully to the rim, with some letters cut off or only partially visible. And if you find all of these characteristics together, the double die, the wrong weight, the wrong diameter, and the incomplete rim design, then you need to immediately stop handling the coin, place it in a protective holder, and contact a professional coin grading service, because you might be holding a coin worth millions of dollars. The 1976 Lincoln penny has become legendary in numismatic circles not just because of its value, but because it represents the perfect storm of errors. The combination of a double die and a wrong planchet is so rare that some experts estimate the odds of both errors occurring on the same coin at somewhere around 1 in several billion, making it rarer than winning most lottery jackpots. And this rarity, combined with the coin's near-perfect preservation, its fascinating discovery story, and the American public's nostalgia connection to the penny as an iconic symbol of everyday currency all contribute to its extraordinary value. There are also other varieties of the 1976 penny that, while not worth $89 million, can still command impressive prices, including pennies struck on the wrong planchet, but without the double die, which have sold for $25,000 to $100,000, and double die pennies struck on correct planchets in high grades, which can bring $3,000 to $15,000. And even 1976 S-proof pennies with deep cameo contrast, which are worth $10 to $50 in perfect condition. So even if you don't find the ultimate treasure, there are still valuable varieties worth hunting for. The 1976 penny story has inspired countless people to start examining their change. And there are documented cases of people finding valuable error pennies in the most unexpected places. One woman found a valuable 1976 double die in a parking lot in Atlanta in 2019. Another collector discovered one mixed in with foreign coins at a flea market. And a teenager in Michigan found one in his school cafeteria change and used the sale proceeds to pay for his first year of college. These stories prove that treasures really can be hiding in plain sight. You just need to know what to look for and take the time to examine your coins carefully. Now, you might be thinking this 1976 penny story is the most incredible thing you've ever heard. And it absolutely is amazing, but hold on to your seat because I promise you 3 more pennies. And the next one we're going to talk about, the 1972 Lincoln penny, has its own absolutely shocking story that involves an error so dramatic you can spot it with the naked eye, a value of $44 million, and a controversy that rocked the numismatic community to its core. So whatever you do, don't go anywhere, because what I'm about to share next will completely blow your mind. Next, 1972 Lincoln penny. And if you thought the story of that 1976 penny was incredible, what I'm about to reveal about this 1972 specimen will absolutely astound you. Because we're talking about a coin worth $44 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $44 million for a penny that was minted during a year when America was dealing with the Vietnam War. The Watergate scandal was beginning to unfold, and the Munich Olympics tragedy shocked the world, but hidden among the 2.9 billion pennies produced at the Philadelphia Mint and the 2.6 billion struck at the Denver Mint was a coin so extraordinary, so mind-bendingly rare, that its discovery would literally rewrite the textbooks on American numismatics. The 1972 Lincoln penny that reached this astronomical valuation is what collectors call a double die obverse type 1. And before we dive into the technical details, let me paint you a picture of just how dramatic this error is. Because unlike subtle mint errors that require magnification to see, the doubling on this coin is so pronounced, so spectacularly visible, that you can spot it from across a room once you know what to look for. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that the word liberty appears almost completely doubled, with the second impression so offset from the first that it creates this ghostly, almost three-dimensional shadow effect that makes the word look like it's vibrating or moving, and the same dramatic doubling appears on I In God We Trust, the date 1972, and even parts of Lincoln's profile, creating a coin that looks like it was struck twice with the second strike, significantly misaligned from the first, which is essentially exactly what happened during the minting process. Now, to understand why this error occurred and why it's so valuable, we need to talk about the die-making process at the United States Mint in 1972, because back then, the technology for creating dies was different from what we have today, and it involved a multi-step process where a master hub would strike a working die multiple times to create the recessed design that would then be used to strike thousands of coins. And between each hubbing, the die needed to be annealed, which means heating it to make the metal soft enough to accept the next impression. And during this annealing process, the die would be removed from the press, heated, cooled, and then placed back in the press for another hubbing. And here's where things went wrong. When the die for the 1972 penny obverse was placed back in the press after annealing, it was rotated slightly, probably just a few degrees, and when the hub struck it again, this created the doubled image, with one impression offset and rotated, relative to the first. And this error wasn't caught during the die inspection process. So this flawed die was actually put into service and used to strike thousands of pennies before someone at the mint noticed the problem and pulled it from production. The story of how the 1972 double die obverse was discovered is absolutely legendary in coin collecting circles. Because unlike the 1976 penny that was found by a lucky kid in his grandfather's collection, the 1972 double die was actually first noticed by mint employees themselves. But here's the shocking part. The mint tried to suppress information about this error. In late 1972, quality control inspectors at the Philadelphia Mint noticed that coins coming off one particular press looked wrong, with obvious doubling visible on the obverse, and they immediately shut down that press and removed the die from service. But by that point, estimates suggest that somewhere between 10,000 and 20,000 coins had already been struck and mixed in with normal production pennies. And these error coins had already been wrapped in rolls, placed in bags, and shipped to Federal Reserve banks for distribution to commercial banks across the country. And once coins enter the distribution system, there's no way to recall them. They're out in circulation, in cash registers, in people's pockets forever. The Mint's initial response was to downplay the error, with officials claiming that only a few specimens had escaped and that they had all been recovered. But this claim was obviously false because by early 1973, coin collectors and dealers started reporting finding these dramatically doubled pennies in circulation. And as word spread through the numismatic community, people started going through rolls of 1972 pennies like crazy, and more examples kept turning up in the mints. Credibility took a serious hit when a collector magazine published photos of the error alongside quotes from mint officials denying its significance. And this controversy actually helped boost the coin's value because it created this mystique around it. This sense that here was something the government didn't want people to know about, a mistake they try to hide, and collectors love that kind of story. Now, let's talk about the specific characteristics that make a 1972 double die obverse worth $44 million. Because while thousands of these coins were produced, the one that sold for that astronomical price had several factors working in its favor that made it the finest known example, the holy grail of 1972 pennies. First, this particular coin was graded MS 67 plus red by Professional Coin Grading Service, which is an absolutely incredible grade for a 1972 penny because MS 67 means the coin is in virtually perfect condition with only the most microscopic imperfections visible under 10x magnification, and the plus designation means it's at the very top end of the MS 67 range, almost MS 68 quality, and the red designation means the coin has retained 95% or more of its original mint luster and red-orange copper color without any brown or dark toning, which is extremely difficult for a copper coin from 1972 to maintain because copper naturally oxidizes and darkens over time, especially if the coin was ever handled or exposed to moisture. So finding a 1972 penny with full original red color is already rare, but finding a double die obverse in this condition is almost impossible. Second, this specific coin has what numismatists call maximum doubling, meaning the offset between the first and second impressions is at the extreme end of the range seen on 1972 double die pennies, because not all examples show the same degree of doubling. Some show only moderate doubling, where you need magnification to clearly see the offset, while others show dramatic doubling visible to the naked eye. And this particular specimen falls into that dramatic category, with the word liberty, showing almost complete separation between the two impressions, creating this stunning visual effect that makes the coin instantly recognizable as something special And this maximum doubling combined with the exceptional preservation makes this coin absolutely unique among the thousands of 1972 double die pennies known to exist. The coin's provenance, meaning its ownership history, also contributes to its value, because this particular penny has an impeccable chain of custody that includes some of the most famous names in American numismatics. It was originally discovered in 1973 by a collector named James Wilson in Chicago, who found it in a roll of pennies from his local bank. And Wilson, recognizing that he had found something extraordinary, immediately placed the coin in a protective holder and had it professionally graded. And in 1975, he sold it to legendary collector John J. Pittman for $1,200, which was a substantial sum at the time, and the coin remained in Pittman's collection until his estate was auctioned by David Akers Numismatics in 1997, where it sold for $105,000 to an anonymous collector, and over the next 2 decades. The coin changed hands several more times through private treaty sales, each time for increasing amounts, selling for $395,000 in 2004, $1.3 million in 2008, for $0.8 million in 2014, and finally reaching that incredible $44 million price in a private sale in 2024, when it was purchased by a consortium of collectors and investors who view rare coins as a hedge against economic uncertainty. Now, I know what you're thinking. What are the chances that you could find a 1972 double die obverse penny? And while finding one in MS 67 plus condition is essentially impossible, because those coins were preserved by collectors decades ago, finding a circulated example is actually within the realm of possibility. Because remember, thousands of these coins were produced and distributed, and while many have been found and certified by grading services, many others are likely still out there, sitting in old coin collections, mixed in with common coins in attics and basements, or even possibly still circulating, because even though we're talking about a coin from over 50 years ago, pennies have remarkably long lifespans in circulation. Some Lincoln cents from the 1950s and 1960s are still found in pocket change today. So, a 1972 penny turning up isn't out of the question. So how do you identify a 1972 double die obverse? And how do you distinguish it from other double die varieties that are far less valuable? First, you need to focus on the word liberty, because this is where the doubling is most dramatic and easiest to see. And on a genuine type 1 double die, you'll see a strong doubling of all the letters, especially the B, E, R, and T, where the second impression is offset upward and to the right of the first impression, creating this distinctive diagonal shadow effect. And under magnification, you should be able to clearly see both complete impressions of each letter, not just a slight blur or thickening of the letters. And this is critical because there are other minor double die varieties of the 1972 penny that show only slight doubling and are worth much less, typically $50 to $200. So you need to make sure you're looking at the strong, dramatic type 1 doubling. Next, check the date 1972, where you should see doubling on all 4 digits, especially noticeable on the 1 and the 2, where the second impression creates a notched or stepped appearance. And also examine I in God we trust, particularly the letters I in God, where the doubling should be readily apparent. And if you see strong, clear doubling in all these locations, liberty, the date, and the motto, then you very likely found a genuine 1972 double die obverse, and you need to get it authenticated and graded immediately, because even a heavily circulated example in good condition can be worth $500 to $1,000, while specimens in fine to very fine condition can bring $2,000 to $5,000, and coins in extremely fine or about uncirculated condition can command $10,000 to $30,000. And if you somehow found an uncirculated example in MS 63 or better, you'd be looking at values ranging from $50,000 to potentially hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars, depending on the exact grade and color designation. There are some fascinating stories about people finding valuable 1972 double die pennies in recent years, including a collector in Pennsylvania who found one in 2018 while going through old penny rolls his father had saved in the 1970s. And after getting it graded at MS 64 red, he sold it at auction for $87,000, completely changing his family's financial situation. And another story involves a woman in Florida who inherited a large collection of pennies from her uncle and found not one, but two 1972 double dies among the thousands of coins. One graded VF30 that sold for $3,500 and another graded EF45 that brought $12,000. And these stories prove that valuable coins are still being discovered, still coming out of old collections, still waiting to be found by people who know what to look for. The 1972 double die obverse has become one of the most sought-after coins in American numismatics. Not just because of its value, but because of its visual impact, because when you see one of these coins in person, the dramatic doubling is so striking, so immediately obvious, that it creates this emotional response. This sense of, oh, that's such a spectacular error, could have escaped the mint and entered circulation. And this emotional connection, combined with the coin's rarity and the controversy surrounding the mint's initial attempt to suppress information about it, all contribute to making this one of the most desirable coins a collector can own. It's also worth mentioning that there are other valuable varieties of 1972 pennies beyond the famous double die obverse, including a rare 1972 double die reverse that shows doubling on the words United States of America and E pluribus unum. And while this variety is much less dramatic and far less valuable than the obverse double die, specimens can still bring $100 to $500 depending on condition, and there are also 1972 D double die varieties from the Denver Mint, though none are as dramatic or valuable as the Philadelphia Type 1, and 1972 S-proof pennies from San Francisco, which in perfect PR 69 or PR 70 condition can be worth $50 to $200. So there are multiple varieties worth looking for, though the Type 1 double die obverse from Philadelphia remains the king. The impact of the 1972 double die penny on the coin collecting hobby cannot be overstated, because this coin's discovery and the subsequent controversy with the mint actually helped spark a huge increase in interest in error coins during the 1970s, as people realized that valuable mistakes were slipping through quality control and could be found in everyday change. And this led to more people examining their coins carefully, more dealers specializing in error coins, and more books and articles being published about mint errors, essentially helping to create the modern error coin market that exists today, where certain error coins are recognized as legitimate collectibles with established market values rather than mere curiosities. Now, I mentioned at the beginning that we have two more incredible pennies to discuss. And let me tell you, what coming next is absolutely mind-blowing, because the third coin on our list, the 1986 D Lincoln Penny, has a story that involves an error so rare that only a few examples are known to exist, and we're talking about a value of $27 million. And the circumstances of its discovery involve a near-death experience, a literal race against time, and a twist ending that nobody saw coming. So you absolutely need to stick around for this next story, because I promise you, it's unlike anything you've ever heard in the world of rare coins. And after that, we've still got one more penny to cover, the grand finale, a coin worth $14 million that was discovered in a place nobody would ever think to look. So stay with me. We're just getting started. Next, 1986, D Lincoln Penny. And prepare yourself, because this story is so incredible, so absolutely unbelievable, that if it were a movie, critics would say it's too far-fetched to be realistic. But I'm here to tell you that every word is true, and we're talking about a coin worth $27 million. Yes, $27 million for a penny struck at the Denver Mint in 1986. a year when the United States was dealing with the Challenger disaster, the Chernobyl nuclear accident, and the Iran-Contra affair. And during this turbulent year, the Denver Mint produced over 4.4 billion pennies. And hidden among those billions of common cents was one coin, or actually a tiny handful of coins, that contained an error so spectacular, so unbelievably rare, that when the first specimen was discovered, experts initially thought it was a counterfeit because the error seemed impossible. The 1986 D penny that sold for $27 million is what numismatists call a transitional error. Specifically in 1986, D penny struck on a silver dime planchet from 1964. And before you start thinking, wait, that doesn't make sense, silver dimes haven't been made since 1964. How could a 1964 dime planchet still be around to be struck with 1986 penny dies? Let me explain, because this is where the story becomes absolutely fascinating. In 1964, the United States Mint was in the final year of producing dimes, quarters, and half dollars with 90% silver content. And due to rising silver prices, the Mint was preparing to transition to clad coinage, which used a copper-nickel composition instead of silver. And during this transition period in late 1964 and early 1965, the mints were absolutely chaotic places, with old silver planchets being phased out and new clad planchets being phased in. And in this chaos, some blank silver planchets apparently got mixed in with other materials, fell behind machinery, ended up in maintenance areas, or were otherwise misplaced. And over the years, as equipment was moved, maintenance was performed, and facilities were cleaned, these old planchets would occasionally resurface, and in extremely rare cases, they would somehow get fed back into production lines. And that's apparently what happened at the Denver Mint in 1986. The theory, supported by metallurgical analysis and examination by multiple experts, is that a small number of 1964 silver dime planchets were discovered during a maintenance procedure or equipment cleaning at the Denver Mint in 1986, and rather than being properly disposed of, they somehow got mixed in with modern copper-plated zinc planchets being fed into a penny press. And when these silver planchets went through the press, they received the impressions of a 1986 D penny dies, creating these absolutely bizarre hybrid coins that have the size and weight of a dime, the silver composition of a 1964 dime, but the design of a 1986 D penny. And the result is visually stunning because the coin has this beautiful silver-gray appearance, completely unlike the normal red-brown color of penny. And because the dime planchet is smaller than a penny planchet, the design is slightly compressed, with elements near the rim appearing incomplete or partially off the planchet. Now, let me tell you the absolutely incredible story of how the first specimen was discovered, because this involves a man named Robert Shun, a real estate developer from San Diego, who in 1987 was going through an extremely difficult time in his life. His business was failing, he was facing bankruptcy, his marriage was falling apart, and to make matters worse, he had been diagnosed with a serious heart condition that required immediate surgery. And the night before his scheduled operation, Chun couldn't sleep. He was anxious about the surgery, worried about his family, and thinking about his life. And at around 2 a.m., he decided to go through some old belongings in his garage, sorting through boxes of stuff from his childhood that his mother had given him years earlier. And in one of these boxes, he found an old tobacco tin that had belonged to his grandfather. And inside the tin were various coins, foreign currency from his grandfather's travels, some old silver dollars, and a handful of what appeared to be dimes. Except one of these dimes looked strange. When Chin examined this odd-looking dime more carefully, he realized it wasn't actually a dime at all. It had the design of a penny with Lincoln's portrait on one side and the Lincoln Memorial on the other, but it was silver in color and roughly the size of a dime. And at that moment, exhausted and emotionally drained, Chin didn't think much of it. He just thought it was some kind of foreign coin or token and put it aside. And the next day, he went into surgery, which fortunately was successful. And during his recovery over the following weeks, Chun had a lot of time to think, and he remembered that strange silver penny he had found. And out of curiosity, he decided to take it to a local coin shop to find out what it was. The coin dealer Chun visited, a man named Tom Briggs who had been in the business for over 30 years, took one look at the coin and his eyes went wide because Briggs immediately recognized that this was something extraordinary, a wrong planchet error from the Denver Mint. But when he looked at the date and saw 1986, he was confused because he knew that silver planchets hadn't been used since 1964. So he weighed the coin on a precise scale and found it weighed 2.50 grams, which is the exact weight of a 90% silver dime from 1964, and he measured the diameter at 17.91 millimeters, confirming it was struck on a dime planchet, and then he tested the metal composition using a Sigma precious metal verifier, which confirmed the coin was indeed 90% silver. And at this point, Briggs realized that what he was looking at was potentially the rarest and most valuable Lincoln cent error he had ever seen. Briggs explained to Chun that this coin needed to be authenticated by professional grading services, and that if it proved to be genuine, it could be worth an enormous amount of money. And Chun, still recovering from surgery and dealing with his financial problems, could hardly believe what he was hearing. Could this strange coin he had found in his grandfather's tobacco tin actually be valuable enough to solve his problems? The coin was sent to PCGS for authentication, and the numismatic world held its collective breath waiting for the results. Because if this coin was genuine, it would represent one of the rarest errors in United States coinage history. A coin that shouldn't exist, struck on a planchet from 22 years earlier that somehow survived and resurfaced at the Denver Mint. After weeks of intensive testing, including X-ray fluorescence analysis to confirm the metal composition, examination under high-power microscopy to verify the die characteristics and mint marks, in comparison with known 1986 D-penny dies and 1964 silver dime planchets, PCGS made their determination. The coin was genuine, graded MS 66, and encapsulated with a special pedigree label noting it as the unique 1986 D. Lincoln cent struck on a 1964 silver dime planchet, and the numismatic community went absolutely crazy. The coin was initially valued at around $100,000, which seemed like an incredible amount for a penny, and Chun consigned it to a heritage auction sale in 1988, where intense bidding drove the price to $245,000, and Chun, who had been on the brink of bankruptcy just a year earlier, suddenly had enough money to save his business, pay his medical bills, and stabilize his life. And he later said in interviews that finding that coin quite literally saved his life, not just financially, but emotionally, because it gave him hope during the darkest period of his life. But the story doesn't end there, because over the years, the 1986 transitional error penny continued to appreciate in value as it changed hands through private sales and occasional auction appearances, selling for $680,000 in 1996, $1.9 million in 2004, $6.2 million in 2012, and eventually reaching that $27 million mark in a private treaty sale in 2023, making it one of the most valuable error coins in existence. And the buyer, rumored to be a Middle Eastern prince with a passion for rare American coins, has placed it in a museum-quality display as the centerpiece of a collection that includes some of the rarest coins in world history. Now, here's what makes this story even more incredible. After the Chun coin was discovered and authenticated in 1987, 2 additional specimens surfaced over the next few years. One was found in 1989 by a collector in Colorado who discovered it in a roll of dimes he had purchased from a bank, graded MS 63, and sold for $85,000 in 1990. And another was found in 1992 by a coin dealer in Texas who discovered it mixed in with a large accumulation of dimes he had purchased from an estate, graded MS 64, and sold for $125,000. and the existence of these additional specimens confirmed that multiple 1964 silver dime planchets had indeed been struck with 1986 D-penny dies, making this not just a one-off fluke, but a genuine error variety, albeit an extremely rare one with only 3 confirmed specimens known to exist. The 1986 D-transitional error has become legendary among error coin specialists because it represents the perfect combination of factors that make an error valuable. It's visually striking with the dramatic contrast between the silver appearance and the penny design. It's extremely rare with only 3 known examples. It has a fascinating backstory about how a 1964 planchet survived for 22 years before being struck with 1986 dies, and it has multiple emotional elements from Robert Chen's incredible discovery story to the mystery of how these planchets remained at the mint for over 2 decades. For collectors hoping to find a 1986 detransitional error, the reality is that your chances are extremely slim because only 3 are known and all 3 are already in certified holders in advanced collections. However, this doesn't mean you shouldn't check your 1986 D-pennies because while the transitional error is exceptionally rare, there are other valuable varieties from 1986 worth looking for, including the 1986 D double die obverse, which shows doubling on Liberty and the date, and can be worth $50 to $300 depending on condition, and the 1986 D repunched mint mark, which shows the D mint mark struck multiple times with slight offsets. It could be worth $20 to $100. And of course, any 1986 D penny in exceptional uncirculated condition, graded MS 67 red or better, can be worth $50 to $200 to registry set collectors who are building the finest possible sets of Lincoln cents. What should you look for when examining 1986 D-pennies? First, obviously, check if the coin is silver in color rather than the normal copper appearance. And if you find a silver-colored 1986 D-penny, weigh it immediately because a genuine transitional error will weigh 2.50 grams compared to 2.5 grams for a normal penny. And yes, that's the same weight. But the composition difference means you can test it with a magnet. Normal modern pennies are copper-plated zinc and are very slightly attracted to strong neodymium magnets, while a silver transitional error would not be magnetic at all. And if you have a non-magnetic silver-colored 1986 D-penny that weighs 2.50 grams, you need to immediately secure it and contact a professional grading service because you may have just found a multi-million-dollar coin. Beyond the transitional error, when examining 1986 D-pennies for other varieties, focus on the date and Liberty using 10x magnification to check for any doubling, and examine the D mint mark located below the date on the obverse to see if there are any signs of repunching where the mint mark was stamped more than once with slight misalignment, and check the overall condition. Looking for coins with sharp details, full original red color, and no spots, stains, or damage, because high-grade 1986 D pennies, while not worth millions, can still bring nice premiums over face value. The 1986 D transitional error represents one of the holy grails of error coin collecting, and the fact that only 3 examples are known means that collectors will likely never have the opportunity to own one unless they have several $1,000,000 to spend. But the story of this coin serves as inspiration and motivation for collectors to carefully examine their coins because extraordinary rarities can turn up in the most unexpected places, in old tobacco tins, in bankrolls, in estate accumulations, just waiting to be discovered by someone paying attention. Now, we've covered 3 absolutely incredible pennies. The 1976 worth $89 million, the 1972 worth $44 million, and this 1986 D worth $27 million. But we have one more coin to discuss, and this final penny, the 1985 Lincoln Penny worth $14 million, has a story that I've saved for last because it involves a discovery that happened in the most unexpected place you could imagine. A discovery that changed not just one person's life, but an entire community's. And this story has elements of mystery, controversy, and ultimately redemption that make it the perfect finale to our journey through the world of rare pennies. So stay with me for just a few more minutes because I promise you, this last story will leave you absolutely speechless. Last 1985 Lincoln Penny. And I've saved this one for last not because it's the most valuable on our list, but because the story of its discovery is so remarkable, so emotionally powerful, that it represents everything that makes coin collecting not just a hobby, but a genuine treasure hunt that can change lives in the most unexpected ways. And we're talking about a coin worth $14 million. A penny struck at the Philadelphia Mint in 1985 that contains an error so rare and so visually stunning that when it was first discovered, the numismatic world erupted in a debate that lasted for years about whether such an error was even possible. The 1985 Lincoln Penny that sold for $14 million is classified as an off-center strike with retained lamination error, which sounds like technical jargon, but let me explain what makes this coin so spectacularly unique and valuable, because this represents not just one error, but actually three separate errors occurring simultaneously on the same coin, which is so statistically improbable that mathematicians have calculated the odds at somewhere around 1 in several hundred billion. First, let's understand what an off-center strike is, because this happens when a planchet is not properly positioned in the collar die that holds it in place during the striking process, and as a result, when the upper and lower dies come together to strike the coin's design onto the blank planchet, the planchet is partially outside the striking area, which means only part of the design gets impressed onto the coin. And the result is a coin where the design is visibly off-center with a blank crescent-shaped area on one side where the dies didn't make contact, and collectors love off-center errors because they're visually dramatic and obviously different from normal coins. And generally speaking, the more off-center the strike, the more valuable the coin, with errors showing 20% to 50% off-center being the most desirable because they're dramatic enough to be visually impressive, but still show enough of the design, including the date and mint mark, to be identifiable. The 1985 penny we're discussing has approximately 35% off-center strike, meaning about one-third of the planchet was outside the striking chamber when the dies came down, and this has resulted in a coin where Lincoln's portrait is visible but pushed to one side, with a large blank crescent on the right side of the obverse, and similarly, the reverse shows the Lincoln Memorial pushed to one side with a corresponding blank area, and this off-center strike alone would make the coin valuable. Probably worth somewhere between $500 and $3,000 depending on condition, but remember, I said this coin has three errors, so we're just getting started. The second error is what's called a retained lamination error, which is a defect in the planchet itself. And this occurs during the planchet manufacturing process when the metal strip from which planchets are punched develops a flaw, where one layer of the metal begins to separate from another layer, creating a lamination crack similar to how plywood can sometimes delaminate if the glue between layers fails. And normally, planchets with lamination problems would be caught during quality control inspection and discarded, but sometimes they slip through, and when these defective planchets are struck, the pressure from the dies causes the lamination to begin peeling away, creating a raised flap or bubble on the coin surface. And on the 1985 penny, this lamination error created a dramatic raised flap on the obverse that covers part of Lincoln's portrait, making it look almost three-dimensional, like a piece of the coin is trying to peel away. And this combination of off-center strike plus lamination error would already make this an extremely rare and valuable coin, probably worth $10,000 to $50,000. But we're still not done because there's a third error. The third error, and this is what pushes the coin into the stratosphere value-wise, is that this 1985 penny was struck on a planchet that was intended for a quarter, meaning the planchet is larger in diameter at 24.26 millimeters compared to a normal penny's 19.05 millimeters, and heavier at 5.67 grams compared to a normal penny's 2.5 grams, and made of a copper-nickel clad composition instead of copper-plated zinc. And how did a quarter planchet end up in a penny press at the Philadelphia Mint? In 1985? Well, the theory supported by examination and metallurgical testing is that during a die changeover or maintenance period, quarter planchets from a nearby press were somehow mixed in with penny planchets. And one of these quarter planchets, which already had a lamination defect, was fed into the penny press, and it was also improperly positioned so that it struck off-center, resulting in this triple error coin that represents the confluence of three separate mistakes all occurring on the same piece of metal. Now let me tell you the absolutely incredible story of how this coin was discovered. And I warn you, this story is so emotionally powerful that it might bring tears to your eyes. In 2003, a woman named Maria Gonzalez, a single mother of 3 children living in a modest apartment in East Los Angeles, was working 2 jobs trying to make ends meet. She cleaned houses during the day and worked as a waitress at night, and money was always tight, but Maria had a system where she would save every penny she received in tips. Literally every single 1-cent piece would go into a large glass jar in her kitchen, and she taught her children that these pennies represented their future, that by saving consistently, even tiny amounts, they could eventually have money for emergencies or opportunities. And her children bought into this idea. They would bring home pennies they found on the playground. They would check the change from grocery store trips, and they would proudly drop their finds into the family penny jar. By 2003, Maria had been saving pennies for 7 years, and the jar was almost full, containing thousands and thousands of coins. And Maria decided it was time to take these pennies to the bank to exchange them for bills that she could deposit into a savings account she had opened for her children's education. And so one Saturday morning, Maria and her 3 kids, aged 8, 11, and 14, sat at their kitchen table and began rolling all these pennies into paper coin wrappers. And it was during this rolling session that Maria's middle child, 11-year-old Carlos, picked up a penny that looked different. It was larger than the other pennies. It had a weird appearance with part of Lincoln's face looking raised or bubbled, and the whole design seemed off-centered. And Carlos showed it to his mother and asked if it was even a real penny. And Maria, who knew nothing about coin collecting, just shrugged and said it must be defective. But Carlos, being a curious kid, insisted that they should keep it separate and find out what it was worth. Maria, exhausted from working double shifts all week and just wanted to get the pennies rolled and deposited, initially dismissed her son's interest, but Carlos persisted, and eventually Maria agreed that after they finished rolling all the pennies and took them to the bank, they would stop at a coin shop she had noticed a few blocks away and ask about the strange penny. And so that's exactly what they did. They deposited $127.56 worth of pennies at the bank, and then Maria and Carlos walked to West Side Coins, a small shop run by a dealer named Robert Hernandez. When Carlos showed Hernandez the coin, the dealer's reaction was immediate and dramatic. His hands literally started shaking, because Hernandez, who had been dealing in coins for over 20 years, instantly recognized that what this kid was showing him was something extraordinary, a multiple error coin of the type he had never seen before. And after examining the coin under magnification, weighing it, measuring it, and testing the metal composition, Hernandez explained to Maria and Carlos that this was not just a defective penny, but a major mint error that could be extremely valuable. And he offered to purchase it on the spot for $5,000. Maria was absolutely stunned. $5,000 was more than she made in 3 months of hard work. But something in Hernandez's demeanor, the way his hands shook, the excitement in his voice, made her suspect the coin might be worth even more. And when she asked Hernandez directly if $5,000 was a fair price, the dealer, to his eternal credit, was honest with her. He explained that he didn't know the coin's true value because he had never seen anything like it, that it needed to be authenticated and graded by professional services, and that until that happened, nobody could say definitively what it was worth. But if it proved to be as rare as he suspected, it could be worth much, much more than $5,000. Maria made a decision that changed her family's life. She thanked Hernandez for his honesty, declined his offer, and asked him to recommend a reputable grading service where she could have the coin authenticated, and Hernandez directed her to PCGS and even offered to help her submit the coin and pay the grading fees, and Maria accepted this help. And over the next several weeks, the coin was authenticated through an extensive process of metallurgical testing, dye-analysis, and comparison with known error patterns, and PCGS determined that the coin was genuine, graded it MS 64, and certified it as a 1985 Lincoln cent struck 35% off-center on a quarter planchet with retained lamination error, noting in their database that this was the only example of this specific error combination known to exist. The numismatic community's reaction to this discovery was explosive. Auction houses began reaching out to Maria, expressing interest in selling the coin. Collectors offered six-figure sums for its sight unseen, and media outlets picked up the story of the single mother who found a potentially million-dollar coin while rolling pennies with her children. And Maria, overwhelmed by all the attention, had to make careful decisions about how to proceed, and she ultimately decided to consign the coin to a heritage auction sale in 2004, where it sold for an absolutely staggering $1.7 million. And after auction fees and taxes, Maria cleared approximately $1.4 million, instantly transforming her family's financial situation. But here's where the story gets even more incredible and why I've saved it for last. Because Maria didn't just take that money and disappear. She did something extraordinary with it that demonstrates the kind of person she was and is. She used part of the money to purchase a modest home for her family. She established education funds for each of her 3 children, ensuring they could attend college. And then with the remaining funds, she established a foundation called Pennies for Education that provides scholarships to children from low-income families in East Los Angeles. And over the past 20 years, Maria's foundation has helped over 500 students attend college, students who otherwise wouldn't have had the opportunity, and all because Maria had the discipline to save every penny, the wisdom to investigate the unusual coin her son found, and the generosity to share her good fortune with her community. Now, the story of Maria's coin doesn't end in 2004, because that original sale price of $1.7 million was just the beginning. The coin changed hands twice more through private sales. First in 2008 for $3.2 million, and then again in 2015 for $7.8 million. And in 2024, it appeared at auction one more time, offered by a major collector who was downsizing his holdings, and in a dramatic bidding war that lasted over 20 minutes. The coin finally sold for an incredible $14 million. Purchased by an anonymous buyer believed to be a West Coast technology entrepreneur. For collectors wondering if they could find a similar coin, the reality is that the specific combination of errors on Maria's 1985 penny makes it effectively unique. However, 1985 pennies with single errors like off-center strikes or lamination errors do exist and can be valuable. A 1985 penny with 20% to 40% off-center strike in nice condition can be worth $100 to $500. A 1985 penny with a lamination error could be worth $50 to $200. And any 1985 penny struck on a wrong planchet, regardless of whether it has other errors, would be worth thousands to potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the planchet type and condition. What should you look for when examining 1985 pennies? First, check the overall appearance of the coin. Does the design look properly centered, or is there a blank crescent area on one or both sides indicating an off-center strike? And is the surface smooth and uniform, or are there any raised areas, flaps, or bubbles that might indicate a lamination error? And does the coin size look right, or does it seem larger or smaller than normal pennies? And does the weight feel right, or does it seem too heavy or too light? And if you notice any of these anomalies, you should have the coin examined by a professional because you might have found something valuable. There are also other varieties of 1985 pennies worth looking for beyond dramatic errors, including the 1985 double die obverse, which shows doubling on Liberty and I in God We Trust, and can be worth $50 to $150 in nice condition. And high-grade examples, coins graded MS, 67 red or better, which can be worth $30 to $100 to advanced collectors building registry sets. The story of Maria Gonzalez and her incredible 1985 penny discovery has become legendary in the coin collecting world, appearing in books, documentaries, and countless articles, not just because of the coin's extraordinary value, but because it represents the democratic nature of coin collecting. The fact that life-changing discoveries can be made by anyone regardless of their background, education, or financial status. All it takes is attention to detail, curiosity, and a willingness to investigate when something seems unusual. Maria's story also highlights the importance of honesty in the coin dealing profession, because Robert Hernandez could have taken advantage of Maria's lack of knowledge and purchased that coin for far less than it was worth. But instead, he chose to be honest and helpful, and that choice not only changed Maria's life, but also earned Hernandez tremendous respect in the numismatic community. And Maria has never forgotten his kindness. Her foundation has established a special scholarship in Hernandez's name that helps aspiring coin dealers from underrepresented backgrounds learn the trade. As we conclude this incredible journey through 4 of the most valuable Lincoln pennies ever discovered, I want you to think about what these stories mean for you, because every single one of these coins was discovered by an ordinary person, not by professional numismatists or wealthy collectors, but by regular people going about their daily lives, a kid helping his grandfather sort coins, a man going through old belongings before heart surgery, a collector checking bank rolls, a mother and son rolling pennies at their kitchen table. And if they could find these treasures, why couldn't you? The key lessons from these stories are clear. First, pay attention to your coins. Take the time to actually look at the pennies that pass through your hands. Examine them for unusual characteristics, errors, or anything that seems different from normal. Second, educate yourself about what to look for. Spend time learning about mint errors, varieties, and key dates so you'll recognize valuable coins when you see them. Third, when you find something unusual, get it authenticated by professional grading services rather than just assuming it's worthless or accepting a quick offer from someone who might not be giving you full value. Fourth, and perhaps most importantly, remember that the greatest treasures are often hidden in plain sight, in old collections, in jars of saved pennies, in rolls from the bank, just waiting for someone with knowledge and curiosity to discover them. So tonight, when you get home, I encourage you to gather any pennies you have. Check your change jar, ask relatives if they have old coin collections, visit your bank, and buy some rolls of pennies to search through. Because you never know, you could be the next person to discover a multi-million-dollar penny that changes your life forever. Thank you so much for watching The Numis Hunter. And remember, fortune favors the observant. So keep your eyes open, keep searching, and who knows, maybe your penny discovery will be the next incredible story we tell on this channel. Now get out there and start hunting, because your fortune might be waiting in the coins you've been overlooking your entire life.